So over the weekend, I saw an article on my Twitter feed from a website called Queerty. And this is an article that was talking about a transphobic comment made by one of my favorite YouTubers, Willem. The comment was taken from an episode of Willem's show, Suck Less. The comment was in response to a question from one of the watchers of the show who was talking about their boyfriend who came out to them recently as being a trans man. The comment kind of suggested that, essentially, according to Willem, and if you see the clip of the video, it was kind of saying that it was wrong because the person never disclosed until a month into the relationship that they were trans. And there was a whole comment about how just because this person had their breasts taken off did not necessarily make them a man. Now, this has caused a lot of internet ire among people who feel like that was really a very problematic thing to say. And unfortunately for Willem, they're right. I think a lot of the comments that Willem made were extremely ignorant, and they came from a place of genuine misunderstanding. Not to give him the benefit of the doubt and not to suggest that somehow what he said was excusable. It isn't. The thing about it is, and the thing that people don't necessarily realize, is that his comments come from a place of genuinely not knowing what the fuck he's talking about. And unfortunately, that's true of a lot of cis people when it comes to the transgender experience. I think there's sort of an idea that when you're a trans person, or if you're a person who is a drag queen who does so much, that kind of gender play, and I feel like there's this assumption that if you're a drag queen, you're probably better than this. You probably know a lot more about what is and isn't transphobic, and you probably have a better handle on what comes off as transphobic. And I think for a lot of people, Willem's comments came off kind of shocking. I know when I first heard about it, I kind of couldn't believe it. But then I was reminded that he's not the only one who's had this problem. A few years ago, and I even did a video about this not that long ago in the beginning of my creating a YouTube channel, RuPaul herself had a lot of problems with transphobic comments. I personally believe RuPaul's comments, while transphobic, were also kind of ignorant and maybe made in a joking manner. The segment, of course, that was the biggest controversy was the she-male or female segment, which is a mini challenge in season 6 that was eventually completely pulled and can't even be found in the iTunes version of the episode. So it's important to know that Logo did react in the right way, and eventually that segment was taken out and RuPaul kind of apologized for it. It's complicated. The point is, I actually don't think saying something that is transphobic necessarily makes you a transphobic person. The reality is a lot of cis people don't know that much about the trans community. There's this idea that with all our visibility and all the trans people that are out there, that we should be better, in a better place than where we are, and that more people should understand things. But the reality is that just isn't the case. And the sad fact is, even trans people have transphobic ideals. There's a big discussion going on right now about whether or not you have to have gender dysphoria to be considered transgender. And that's actually going to be part 3 of this video series. Part 2 will be about the issue of disclosure. Now, the long and short of my thoughts about what Willem said and why we need to talk about this is that, honestly, I don't want to make it seem like I'm giving Willem a pass on this. What he said was very transphobic. It actually took a playbook directly from Germaine Greer, which Courtney Act, who was in the segment with him, points out in the segment. So that's kind of problematic itself. Germaine Greer is, for those of you who don't know, a feminist icon from the, I think, 70s through the 90s, who has since become a huge TERF. That's trans-exclusionary radical feminist, who often use really disgusting practices to delegitimize trans people. I think it's worth noting, and perhaps something I should have mentioned in the video, is what transphobia is and what it isn't. In its most basic sense, transphobia is the hatred of trans people.
Willem does not strike me as someone who hates trans people. Therefore, while his comments do match that of those who are transphobic and do hate trans people, this does not inherently make him a transphobic person. In his apology, Willem acknowledges that his words, whether he intended them to be or not, could be used as a justification for violence against trans people, which is very true and often important to note in conversations about transphobia.
I think part of the issue is that for people who are even quasi-internet famous, we have this idea that when they make a mistake, no apology is ever going to make up for that. And while it doesn't make it okay, I think it's important that he showed the initiative and the desire to understand why what he said was wrong. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't give people the room for. Unfortunately, there is this idea that if you say something problematic, there's this sort of holier than thou idea that you can't say anything wrong, you can't make a mistake, and if you do, no apology is going to matter because we're not going to give you the space to learn and grow.
None of this is to say that our internet celebrities shouldn't be held accountable, but who is without problematicness to hold them accountable? This goes back to an earlier video I made about Caitlyn Jenner. We build people up to almost hoping to watch them crumble. While we absolutely need to hold people accountable for their actions, at a certain point we have to ask ourselves who gets to dictate whether or not someone has learned their lesson and what is accountable enough.
Trans people have every right to be defensive about transphobic comments. That is not acceptable in this day and age. And the reality is, it's not on the onus of trans people to explain our story and what is and isn't transphobic. Plenty of us have already done it, and the information is more than out there. I think this is going to be a very important topic, and I'm disheartened that this all happened, but I want to give Willem the benefit of the doubt, because watching his previous content, I've never really had a reason to believe that he himself was transphobic. Yeah, his jokes are a little iffy, and being someone who is more of a comedic drag queen, you run sort of a risky line when it comes to something like transgender issues. But I do feel like his apology was genuine, and I want to give him the benefit of the doubt for this. I'm the sort of person who, I guess I do try and see the best in a lot of people, and maybe that's not the greatest for me. And I also come from a place of incredible privilege in that I don't have to worry about a lot of things. I don't face a lot of transphobia. This whole conversation is exclusively my thoughts. I'm not in any way trying to speak for the entire transgender community. I wouldn't even know where to begin with that. But the reality is, again, like I said, there's a lot of debates in our community that lean towards transphobic in themselves. I think saying something that's transphobic doesn't necessarily make you someone who is transphobic. It just makes you misinformed. And I think that's ultimately what Willem's issue is, that they were just misinformed on the topic and they didn't speak right. That's ultimately what it is. I still love him and I'm hoping for the best with all of this. Ultimately, only time will tell. Ultimately, only time will tell as to whether or not he did learn a lesson from this or whether or not this is something that's going to become a pattern. And if it is, then that'll be the time where I will have to say, I can't fuck with you anymore, girl. I'm sorry. Love you, but I can't. Please comment down below. Tell me what your thoughts are about this. Do you think I'm coming at this from a completely wrong angle? Do you think I'm giving him too much of the benefit of the doubt? Let me know in the comments down below. And thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, this has been a talk. Oh, I don't like that at all. Bye.